Welcome to My Therapist is Out. Each episode, we talk with a therapist from Open Space Therapy Collective or LGBT community members about mental health and building community. I'm your host, Renee Johnson, licensed therapist and founder of Open Space Therapy Collective, where we are your hub for queer and trans mental health care. This week, we have Dr. Liz Lasky, the founder and CEO of the Lasky Institute of Coaching. She has an annual summit with mission-driven entrepreneurs, a lot of therapists and coaches about how to be a quality leader, what it takes to move forward, how to not only get what you want out of business, but also be able to provide quality services. As we dive into today's topic, please keep in mind that this is a mental health podcast. We will talk about sensitive and difficult issues that are not appropriate for all audiences. Please take care while listening.
Hey everyone, it's Dr. Liz Lasky, and welcome to the 2024 Therapist, 21 Ways to Get What You Want as a business owner and an entrepreneur. And today I'm so excited to have Renee Johnson with us. Hello, Renee.
Hi, Liz. It's so fun to be here.
I'm so pumped to have you here. I'm so excited to, as they say, pick your brain, but also really hear more about your own story, how you have created what you've created. Tell everyone a little bit about yourself, where you started from, and where you are now. Fill us in.
Okay. There are a lot of left turns in this. So
I'm buckled up.
I never thought I would be a therapist or an entrepreneur at all. I started my academic journey wanting to be a painter and a graphic designer. And it was after diving into that space where I realized I really missed working with people, and I still hadn't put together that therapy was an option. Because growing up for me, therapists were trash talked, they were manipulators, they were out to get you. It was just a lot of bad, they had a bad rap. It was the
bad
80s.
Press.
Yeah. So it wasn't until I went back to grad school for a fine arts degree and I randomly took a personality development course. I went to Pratt and they had, you have a certain amount of electives that you can take from any of the disciplines at the school. And most of my paintings were portraiture and really focused on the person. And so I was like, oh, this seems great. And they had an art therapy department there. And I instantly fell in love. For me, it just really clicked, that like creative subconscious connection piece with my own journey, because my mom, growing up, my mom had a really intense mental illness stuff. And so I already kind of knew that language and I knew that culture and how to live in that space. And so it really combined those two for me. And so it has been a deep dive into therapy land since then, which has been really fun. And as I'm sure everybody who's in our field knows, that is a lot of self-growing that happens in the process of becoming a therapist as well.
So tell everyone a little bit about your business now and what life looks like for you now.
Sure. So after grad school, I spent about a decade in community mental health and nonprofits. Mm-hmm. And I loved the work with the clients. The clients were amazing. I really love, as a therapist, I really love working with complex trauma. And so there was a lot of that in that space. And I was in San Francisco. And so in San Francisco, especially throughout the generations, there's a lot of different queer identities. And a lot of the older generations are some that really were on the forefront of the LGBT movements, which were amazing people to work with. And then the younger crew were all fun and all sorts of gender expansiveness. And so it was really, because San Francisco is what it is, queerness was really involved in every aspect. COVID happened and I took a break because I was just so burnt out. I was so burnt out on every level. And I was starting to find a lot of my own countertransference with the system and the client, and couldn't figure out what was burning me out. So I took about a year, 6 months to a year, and really found that the nonprofit systems were killing me. It was, you need to save this client from their multiple illnesses, the fact that they are unhoused, they're food insecure, and all we're going to do is give you $5 and a peanut butter sandwich and then tell you it's your fault if you can't save them.
Right.
Which is, it's impossible. The system is broken. So I took a break, and I was lucky to be able to do that. And in that, I really realized how much I missed working with clients. So I started in private practice. And I was working with a different group at the time and loved it. And I filled up so fast. So I'd moved down to LA during this time. And what I was hearing with the clients, or from the clients that were coming into me, is there is not enough queer knowledgeable, trans knowledgeable mental health providers. There's a lot of people who say they are, but aren't actually of the community, understand what it's like to live as a queer and trans person. And I filled up really fast, and it was great. I love the clients that I was working with. And after about a year of that, I went into solo practice, and that transition continued to be really easy because there was such a need here, which was really surprising to me that need was in LA, but it is. And, something you hear a lot about in business, and I think we do in therapists, is kind of find the holes and find where there's things to poke at and pull at and see what we can do to fill the need. And so it was kind of a little bit of a no-brainer to go into group practice at the time, not knowing what it would take.
We'll get into that.
To start expanding. There was a client need for it. I was feeling pretty lonely as a solo therapist. I think a lot of solo therapists feel this way. I'm a pretty big extrovert and like a lot of community around me. And it was very obvious to me, like, great, let's get more queer therapists together and we'll continue to build that out. So founded Open Space Therapy Collective in LA. We've been open for about a year and a half, a little bit more than that.
Is that it?
Yeah. We did our soft launch in summer of 2022, and then our full launch December of that year.
Wow.
So it's been just over a year, and it's been intense. But we're at the point now where we've got 5 therapists on board, and have a really good foundation. So we're in a pretty big growth push at the moment.
And that growth alone really speaks to the needs that were coming up to have queer identified therapists providing services.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing how, the horror stories we could get into, but it's amazing how many clients come in, and our staff right now is really great because it has a variety of different intersectional identities, but also different parts of the queer community that they treat. So we have some therapists that focus solely on non-monogamous relationships and really in that space. We have therapists that focus really on sex therapy and queer sex and sexuality and what that looks like. I focus a lot on, as a trans non-binary person myself, I focus a lot on gender identities and complex trauma and things like that. So we've got, as we're hiring, we're also looking for enough therapists that reach our entire community, because there's a lot of different needs and things that people want to come in and work on, and want somebody who has some level of their own lived experience that mirrors what they're coming in for.
I'm wondering if we could sort of sidebar on this clinical discussion that I think comes up in a lot of clinical rooms and a lot of supervision rooms. And I would imagine it also doesn't get talked about a lot either, because it can sometimes feel like a risk for a lot of people, clinicians, to talk about this. And I'm wondering if you could shed some light on your philosophy. I think I know what it is, but I want to hear you say it. I'd like to hear you share your philosophy on the importance of having someone from the community provide services to the community. Because, and by the way, you made me laugh when you said, I was surprised that we needed that here in LA. And like, I'm in New York, and I would even think here in New York, we need that, and we need specific training for like, I really think there's a need for that in New York, So
Yeah.
for you and I to be surprised, think about everything in the middle,
Oh yeah.
That's a heartbreaking conversation. Maybe we'll leave some time for if we can get enough Kleenex. But let's go back to the question of what's your philosophy on people of the community only serving people from the community? Because I think it's an interesting business model, and there's clinical demand for it. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think, this kind of goes in line or hand in hand with entrepreneurship and making sure that you're meeting the demands of your clients or customers that are coming in. And also, one thing that you don't get in community mental health is people come in seeking services and they just get assigned somebody. And that doesn't mean that that therapist and that client are going to click or work well together at all. And so, one of the beautiful things that I really love about private practice is people get to choose who they work with. And there's a lot more than just, are you clinically trained in I'll keep using trauma just because that's where I'm familiar. Are you clinically trained in the type of trauma I have? But they also want to connect with you as a person. They want to know that you have lived and understand and have your own experience that is similar to theirs. So you're not just coming at them from a book. And I think in queer community, especially, we're kind of this weird conglomerate of a bunch of different people from a bunch of different cultures and a bunch of different backgrounds, all coming together and communitying together because of our queer identity. And it's been a beautiful and continues to be a beautiful thing, the community that gets built. And therapy is important, obviously, but it's just a piece of the puzzle. And so if our team can be part of their bigger queer community and help be a connection into building out their community so they can thrive past therapy, then it makes the most sense to, one, we get it. You're not educating us. You're not telling us what all these terms mean or why it's difficult to go home for Thanksgiving. And we are the stepping stone to help continue to build out the community that you really need.
And do you have other offerings for community building within your company?
That's where we're going. So we're hoping by the end of this year, we'll be moving into a new space that has more community spaces. So, as I said, we're a year and a half in, and the growth has been big. And part of that is really connecting to other providers of other services. A lot of what we hear from our clients is, I don't have enough queer friends. I don't know where queer spaces are. And so it's, in this, where's the hole for us to fill? It's very much also being a little more forward facing and being a little bit more of a community building space that includes mental health.
Let me ask you about that forward facing part. And even as I am thinking about this question that I'm about to ask, I'm also acknowledging my privilege as I ask this question. Share a little bit about what it's like for you and also for your team. Not that I've met your team members, but oftentimes when clinicians are known for keeping things on the down low. And for example, if someone looks at me, they have no idea how I, identify or what I do or what my race is or, what country I'm from. I say that because I'm not from the United States, like people don't, they wouldn't even, they wouldn't consider that or think about that. And in your community, being out, talking about queerness, talking about being trans, talking about being gender nonconforming, all of those types of things are things that you talk about. And in a way, it's a draw. It's not in a way, it's a draw for your community. But there's sometimes a rub for clinicians on what that means to share of themselves, to share, we can't help what we look like, but there are things that can be controlled and things that may not be controlled. How do you, what's the word? How do you think that through in terms of the disclosure that comes with serving this population, and also very intentionally hiring who you hire?
It's a great question, and something that myself and my team are thinking about constantly. It is really, and I'll speak for myself and how we do things. And that doesn't mean this is how it should be for everybody. But I think especially for the queer community, living out loud and being like authentically yourself is really important to have a healthy life. And it is a really difficult thing to do in every space that we walk into. And so, we have Pride, we have Coming Out Week, we have all of these things. Our community has built in, the bigger community has built in Trans Awareness Day. I mean, you name it. We have these things all over the place, because that practice of intentionally being yourself out loud isn't a privilege for us, isn't something that's intuitive for us. And so doing that as a community is really important so we can exist. I mean, in the first 2 weeks of January, there were already 370 some anti-trans and queer bills in the government trying to get passed. Like, it's important that we continue to live out loud. And that doesn't change just because we're clinicians. And so it's important for us to still be people and still be out loud. And I'm going to use a little bit of strong language, but I think for queer therapists, hypocritical to say to the client, be yourself in the world, and then we not do it also. That doesn't mean I'm going to tell you about like the fight I just had with my partner or this childhood trauma that happened or whatever. But I think especially with the queer lived experience, if we're going to ask our clients to do it, we need to be the example.
Well, it's a parallel process.
Exactly.
So does a queer person need a queer therapist?
That's not a blanket answer. Like, it's, there's no one size fits all. And so each person has to suss out, who that therapist is for them. There was a part of my life where I was having a lot of like career struggles in this terrible job that was super toxic. And I needed a therapist who also had worked in community mental health before. And I found a straight dude who was great and helped me tremendously. And it worked really well for what I needed at that time. Was I going to talk to him about like gender identity and sexuality stuff? Probably not, but that's not what I was looking for in that moment. So it's also really about, and I know you know this, and I know people that are listening know this, like making sure that what your client is coming in to get help with is the thing that you treat. And if it's life stage, if it's identity growth, if it's those things, then maybe you do need a queer therapist.
I think you answered that really eloquently, and I'm glad I asked it, because I think people might be listening to this wondering if that's what we're trying to say. And so I think you answered that really, really well. Tell me a little bit, if it's okay, tell me a little bit about your own experience as a business owner and what it's like creating this therapy business. And by the way, also want to acknowledge how successful it is in such a short amount of time. Obviously, you got some business chops and like instincts are there for you, What has it been like to be running this business and expanding this business with so much showing of self and forward facing? What has that been like?
Really relieving, actually. I think, coming out of grad school, it was very, much the like, just show up as like a partial self and leave all of the space in the room for the client. And I found that, well, I understand why that's taught, and we need that foundation to start gauging how much self to show. In the business development space, it's been really relieving, because it's not another thing that I have to constantly be watching. Am I staring too much? Am I talking too much? Am I taking up too much space? And just be like, you know what? I'm just going to chill out and be myself. And if it turns around and bites me, I'll deal with it at that point. Um, but any of the negative feedback that we've gotten have been from um, people I don't have any respect for anyway, which is just a lot of very anti-queer trolls for the most part. But a lot of the feedback that we've gotten is like, it's so nice to see therapists be themselves. It's so nice to see them laugh and giggle.
Oh,
It's so nice to see
mhm,
them identify as themselves. It's so nice to see like things getting called out in a more public way. The
mhm.
podcast that we have, none of us are, you know, Hollywood industry people. We're all kind of winging it. And the feedback we get from that often is like, it's so nice to hear people have real conversations and not these hyper polished, hold your cards close to your chest conversations.
And what are the trends that you're seeing around entrepreneurship in the therapy world? Are you finding that people are just in your own experience, are you finding that
Mhm.
people are trying to be polished and keeping their cards close to the chest? Are you seeing trends of therapists, of our contemporaries going out and sharing of themselves more? What have you been noticing in the industry?
It's a big mix. I think it's from what I'm seeing, it seems like people are trying to figure that out.
I
Because
agree.
right? Like, I don't think there's
Hmm.
one or the other. I think
Yeah.
you'll see the ones that are very like Gwyneth Paltrow polished and lots of editing. And then you'll see ones that are just kind of rolling out of bed and filming it and being like, well, I did it. And like all of that, all of the in between.
Yeah.
Um, which I really love kind of seeing all of us experimenting and finding our groove. Because
Yeah.
what works for one person isn't going to work for somebody else. So the whole
Yes,
thing feels a little
but
authentic.
yes, but I wonder if we're seeing that in the middle because
Mhm.
people don't want to see that polished anymore. They want to see, like you said, the giggling therapist, the people who are showing up with, spinach in their teeth, or like we want to see whatever that means,
Mhm.
like we want to see that. And I would imagine that people look at someone like you and have some envy or some jealousy of, wow, I want to live that out loud. I want to be able to say what I really want to say. I want my identity to be screaming from the rooftop. I think a lot of people want to be there, but they just don't have the guts for it.
Yeah, that's fair. It's, I agree with you. I think, especially from what our clients are saying, and obviously our clients are drawn to us, so we get a certain section of people, is as a whole, I think we really are craving authenticity, period. And I
Period.
think as we've worked to really build the support system for our therapists, we've really tried to lead with authenticity within our company. And as we've made business decisions, we're trying to lead with what feels right and what feels authentic to us. And same with how we're doing marketing and doing like public facing things. And it's when we try the, when we hit fails
Hmm.
or things that don't work, it's when we're trying to polish something or work something a little too much. Um, and nobody's having a good time in that space either. And so this is a lot of
Yeah.
work. Like being
Yes.
being a coach, being a therapist, being an entrepreneur is a lot of work. And so if you're not having fun, why are you doing it?
Yeah. But you're taking things to a new level, Renee.
What do you tell me
because
about what you're seeing? Because I'm like in
like,
my bubble.
well, I want to acknowledge my privilege again. Like and you have people who probably, you didn't say it like this, but I'm going to imagine send you death threats and tell you that they think that what you do is a crock. And, people like, we don't have to look so far to know that that's true when we're talking about the LGBT and the queer community.
Mhm.
So there are people who I see online, and I think, by the way, I say this, I hope it's coming across with tremendous respect, because I think what you're doing is incredible, which is really why I wanted to have you on the summit. Like, I see people who are like, learn how to sell, you know, fucking digital downloads on, like, keep track of your anxiety, or people are afraid of, like, posting their hire me, like all this. And then, here you are taking up really, some serious space. I'm acknowledging your incredible work, like, you're taking up some serious space that I would imagine sometimes comes at a scary price at times. Like, and I've spoken to other people who have businesses like yours. Someone who I just spoke to last week who got doxxed, and it's like, really, like, this is the reality that we're living in. As people, and when this country sometimes is just working against communities, pick a community,
Mhm.
it is really scary. So I put you at a different level. I do, because there just seems to be a lot of risk.
Mhm. Well, thank you. That is very that's a very high compliment. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't even think we have to talk about that. We can
yeah,
just take that in, you
yeah.
know? And by the way, if you're listening to this, I just want to say this. If you're listening to this and you're having a reaction to what I just said or what this conversation is about, you need to check in with yourself. And
Yeah.
you need to check in with yourself as a person, as a therapist, and also as a business owner.
Mhm.
Either way, if you're like, preach on, Liz, or if you're thinking, of course, what I think is better and this is nonsense, then good, let's dox the whole day long. I don't think we're going to
Mhm.
have a lot of people like that listening to this.
Mm-mm.
It's not who I typically
No.
attract. But you know what? No matter what, we got to check in with
Mm-mm.
ourselves about what this means. Because what I really think this conversation is getting to, and you said this so eloquently. Of course, I can't find it here in my notes as I look. But what is the true point of this? Oh, here it is. Living out loud is most important to having a full life.
Mhm.
Right. And to me, that's what it keeps coming back to. Is that living out loud is the key to having a full life, as a person, as a partner, as a business owner, on and on and on.
Mhm.
And I just see your leadership in that.
Thank you. I think it's really important. And I part of what got me to this point is um, I've approached therapy from the beginning with a pretty activist mindset of like this
Yeah.
system is broken. Like all of the systems are broken, and I can either continue to buy into that or I can say fuck it and make some changes. And if I want to
Yeah.
make some changes, I have to be willing to put myself out there. And one thing about being a nonprofit for 10 years is you get really tired of the bullshit. And I just don't care. I don't have patience for it anymore.
Yeah.
And so when we get the messages about how horrible we are and how we're going to hell and whatever, it's comedic at this point. Like it's clear that they have so much shit going on in their own life that it doesn't affect me, because
Yeah.
all that we are doing is trying to love and support and build new systems so people can be healthy and live their life. And if
Full
somebody's
stop.
coming at me with a critique, a positive, hey, what about this or this or that? Great, I love those conversations. But if you're coming at me with some hate, I don't have time to even waste on that at all.
That year off did you good.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it did me a
That
lot of
year off,
good. It did me a lot of good.
that year off was really a turning point for you. My question for you is, well, I have a couple more questions, but the next one is really like, what do you do personally when you hit a roadblock as a business person in your business, in your business life and growth? When you hit a roadblock, when you have a bad day, what are the things that sort of help you get over that and keep your eye on that bigger picture that you just shared with us?
My team is awesome, and I'm going to get emotional. Um, this is not something that I could do on my own.
Yeah.
I am abundantly lucky to have the team that I do. So our clinical director and our teen specialist are two people that I went to grad school with, that I've stayed in touch with for a very long time, chosen family. And one of our therapists is someone that I worked really closely with from nonprofit land.
Mm-hmm.
And so those three make up our board. And do they have any board experience, any business experience? One of them does because they have a dance studio, but no. But what they do have is an activist mindset. They have a lot of care and passion for the clinical work, for the queer community, for BIPOC community. And all four of us can be really authentic with each other. And I'm having a hard day. I need some extra support. And somebody will step in and be able to provide that. I need a sounding board. This thing just fell apart. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And having those three are priceless. I'm thinking through this thing. Should we do this hiring pattern or that hiring pattern? Okay, great. Take in all of information, decide. And same, they have great ideas. And so trying to do this alone would be impossible. Trying to do this with an ego of I know what I'm doing and I'm the final say would not work. And so, I mean, at the essence, the reason this works is because of the community, which I think is why it's easier to continue to build and build and build that out on this activist community, queer, BIPOC mindset.
That social cohesion piece.
Mm-hmm.
Cohesion piece. So tell me a little bit then, for the people who are listening to this, who are inspired by this conversation, who, you know, this is helping them live a bit more out loud, live a bit more authentically. What do people need to do in order to embody that role of either the entrepreneur, the business person, or just the person who wants to live more authentically and out loud? What are some ways that they can embody that for themselves?
I think, and you cued into this earlier, is really check in with yourself. Like, what is that voice in your head that's saying you can't say this? You can't be this kind of business person. You can't be this kind of therapist. You can't be this kind of coach. Like, what is that? Because that's not something that's going to help you on your journey. And so figuring out what that voice is and what it's trying to do for you. Is it trying to protect you? Is it internalized from something or somebody in your past? And really challenge that. Something that's been helpful for me is in this process is, especially at the beginning, I bought a ton of different coaching programs and listened to a bunch of different coaches and business entrepreneurs and you name it. And still do this, soak it up as much as possible. And there's a lot of great advice and there's a lot of advice that doesn't fit me. And being really honest about that, be like, okay, this piece I like, that piece, no. This piece I like, that piece, no. And really connecting to what fits both for why you're doing this in the first place and what you're seeing works in business. And when something doesn't work, cut it and let it go. Our associate therapists come on really struggle with kind of the out loud piece a little bit, understandably so. And trying to reconcile, how do I be a therapist and be out loud? And it's just try it. Like, things on the internet disappear. They're like online for 48 hours, maybe, and 2% of the people on your Instagram or TikTok, maybe see them, go, huh, and scroll past it. Like nothing is permanent. If you hate it, if it bites you, you can delete it. Like not taking yourself so seriously, maybe.
I think that's good advice, especially that just try it.
Yeah.
Just try it. Nothing's permanent. Well, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story. If you what would be your wish for people listening to this interview? What's your wish for them in terms of a takeaway or something that they can take with them?
Ooh, good question. While this is a lot of work, if it's not something that's filling you up and creating the change that you want to see, you're on the wrong path. So if you need a touchstone, is this fun? Is this moving towards the change that you want? Yes, great. Keep going. Keep pushing it.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much
You got
for
it.
being here, and thank you for your time. And thank all of you for joining us and listening to this episode on the 2024 Therapist, 21 Ways to Go You Want in Business and Entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Dr. Liz Lasky. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Renee.
Thanks for joining us. If you're in California and looking for a therapist, visit our website at openspacetherapycollective.com and book a free intro call with one of our therapists. If you're enjoying My Therapist Is Out, please rate, review, and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. My Therapist Is Out is an Open Space Therapy Collective podcast. Our therapists are Renee Johnson, Kristen Crow, Debbie White, Jenny Nigro, Tara Friedman, Sierra Gruca, and Ernesto Martinez. Our podcast editing is done by Smash and Grab Studio and research and writing done by Matt Wade. We'd love to hear from you about today's topic, so email us at info@openspacetherapycollective.com. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Open Space Therapy Collective. Thanks for listening.